Alrighty, good morning everybody. Welcome to Agrivoltaics 101. We're going to get started here because we've got a little bit of a tight timeline as it is. If you guys could hold your questions until the end of each of their short presentations, then they're hoping to leave about 15 minutes at the end for questions. So with that, the panelists would like to introduce themselves, and we'll get going with that, and then we'll start the presentations.
Good morning. My name is Dorothy Lesoto. I'm a policy and energy analysis intern at Renew Wisconsin, a PhD candidate at University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Good morning. Josh Arnold with University of Wisconsin Office of Sustainability and proud volunteer board member at Renew Wisconsin.
Hi, I'm Sarah Glover. I work for One Energy on land stewardship and vegetation management.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nolan Stumpf. I work in project development with One Energy, and I'm a previous EAP energy analysis and policy intern with Renew. So it's good to be back.
So I'll kick us off with sort of like going over the broad basics of what agrivoltaics is. And to start us off, agrivoltaics is generally broadly defined as reflecting, or as people like to say, whatever land practices on the land paired with solar, then it adopts the name as agrivoltaics. But our broad definition is agrivoltaics simply includes planting pollinator-friendly and native species of plants, while other people define it as they call it agri-solar, which is solar energy production that includes any agricultural activity, and then dual solar use, mostly in regulatory and policy documents. That's why you'll find most of those terms being used, dual solar use. And then solar farming, which is mostly leasing land solely for solar production. Then multi-use land, it's a combination of various land use that includes mixing solar energy production with agriculture, conservation, or other activities on the land. Then a term that is broadly used in Europe is agrivoltaics, which is a term that emphasizes dual land use for both agricultural and photovoltaic solar energy. And as we'll see in other panel presenters, they'll dig deeper into what all this means. And broadly, the research and development on the landscape on this technology in Germany, agrivoltaics first appeared in 1981 until maybe 2004, where now we saw the first agrivoltaic system in Germany coming online. Then France follows, and Italy with in 2011, and then Japan then has its first funded government agrivoltaics in 2013. Then China also comes on board in 2015, and then we see France in 2017, just like Japan, it's government funded, and then USA now is starting to come up in 2018, where we're seeing the mention of agrivoltaics in conversations or within the solar communities and landowners. And then in 2020, the first establishment as an international conference on agrivoltaics is when we see that. And then when we go to the continent in Africa, we see solar had been around for a while, but again, agrivoltaics starts to like being mentioned in 2010, between 2010 and 2020, and we're seeing it mostly in Kenya or East Africa. That's Kenya and Tanzania, and through a partnership with a local UK university. And again, we see the University of Arizona, that is also a big player in the US currently in agrivoltaics, coming on board to support the work and the efforts of people in Kenya and Tanzania through the partnership with other local organizations that are in the space doing really solar work. And their idea was to have controlled plants, controlled fields, and those that have solar to see how different types of vegetation or different types of maize. They looked at maize, vegetables to see how they perform under the solar panels and those that are not. But broadly speaking, the main finding was that the land use productivity increases for the places that have solar, but then we see that some of the plants fare well under the solar panels while others don't. But overall, I think the main point here was that the land use productivity increases. And then if you want to find a good place to see where the different sites, at least in the US, coming back to the US, where these sites are and what the work is and what kind of projects are happening, this is a very good site, Inspire. They have different sites and what they are doing, and also their system size. That's where you'll find most of the information if you want to learn more about this technology. And just an example, and this will also be touched on by One Energy. I know they are doing some work also in this space. Jack Solar Garden was one of the largest in 2021. Agrivoltaics farm in the United States, and they are in collaboration with Enroll and Colorado State University, that is mainly using Jack Solar Garden as a solar farm or a lab for their agrivoltaics research. And yeah, so there is a lot of work in this space, and it's really growing. Of course, the US is coming up as it's sort of like leaning. It came on board later, but the research shows it's because of the policies that were not, and I guess One Energy will touch on this more, like the policies that were not there to support solar energy. But now that we're seeing more policies that are supporting solar energy and more funds going there, we're going to see more of these solar projects, agrivoltaics projects coming on board. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand this over to Josh Arnold. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see everyone here, and just judging by the faces in the audience, it looks like we have people with a wide range of experiences and expertise in dual-use solar and agrivoltaics. So I'm going to share just a little bit about some of our story at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and explicitly about a pilot project that we're working on at the Kegonsa solar location research campus, and share a little bit about that, and then turn it over to our friends at One Energy to share some more great examples about exciting projects happening in Wisconsin and the greater Midwest. So as Dorothy mentioned, NREL and other groups have been looking at this opportunity for dual-use solar for some time. And that was one of the inspirations for our project, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But I just wanted to emphasize that with NREL, with the study that they did back in 2020, that was a study called the 5 C's of agrivoltaic success. And one of those 5 C's, and I've got a slide about it in a moment, but one of those 5 C's is about collaboration. And so I'm going to primarily talk about collaboration and how we've used that to design and to build our pilot project. So without further ado, here is our pilot project at the Kegonsa research location. So what you're looking at here is a dual-use array that was about 4 years in the making, and started out in about 2020 when we started thinking about what might be possible and what makes sense for the University of Wisconsin to think about building. And so the first thing we did is we talked to a whole bunch of really smart people here at Renew Wisconsin, smart people in the industry, and of course, many, many departments and groups on our campus to hear from our stakeholders about what it is that they would like to see out of a pilot project. And we also have to acknowledge up front that one very small pilot project solar array is not going to be able to accomplish everything for everyone. But I think with what we came up with, we're able to accomplish quite a bit for a very small pilot project. So I'll go into a little bit of the detail about the array. So the array is located on 16.44 acres, and it's located at the UW Physical Sciences Lab, which is just outside of Stoughton. It's in between McFarland and Stoughton off of 51 off of Schneider Drive. And the reason why it was selected for that location is the Physical Sciences Lab actually does amazing work, has done amazing work for many, many years. And that group was one of those groups that, when I talk about collaboration, that was a key thing, to have a group that was really interested and willing and excited about hosting a big experiment like that. So the array is 2.25 megawatts, and it has 5,424 bifacial solar modules. And we have 3 different types of racking. And part of the rationale for those 3 different styles of racking was to allow for research, demonstration, education, and other things to be determined, because this array will be with us for between 25 to 40 years. So I'll talk a little bit about the different types of racking in the different areas on the slide here, and then would be happy to have additional questions during the discussion. Also, we'll leave you with some additional agrivoltaics resources that our research group and different folks on campus have compiled. So the racking, we have 3 different types of racking. The first section that you can see in the green portion of the slide here, kind of towards the back, is an elevated fixed tilt section, and these panels, the drip edge is at 8 feet, and the panels then go up to 14 feet. So this is an elevated fixed tilt area, and this is an area where we're hoping to use for demonstration and outreach. So for example, what better way to learn about solar panels than to have a class come and actually have a class underneath 8-foot and 14-foot solar panels. So that's one potential use case that we have for that section. The second section includes single-axis trackers, and we have 480 of those single-axis tracker modules, about 200 kilowatts altogether, and that will be an area that our researchers can use to measure the electricity production, as well as different areas of potential research, either related to horticulture or other things that might be planted on the ground to be determined. So we're really excited about that portion of the array as well. And then the largest portion of the array, these 2 sections here, are sort of a standard fixed tilt portion of the array. And altogether, that is 2,000 kilowatts of the array, 4,800 modules. And in this area, this is where our researchers listen to different stakeholders to determine what types of research would happen at the array. So I'll give you some examples of what we know now, and then one of the really exciting things about this array is that we'll have opportunities to have more discussions about what would members of the public want to see out of this array, and we'll have opportunities over time in the future to collaborate with community partners who are interested in doing citizen science or experiments with our researchers. But what we know now is we have a group out of our extension office that's looking to carve out different plots within the array and grow forage that can be used for potentially for sheep or other animals. We'll have folks who are measuring the long-term impacts to soils, Also eco-hydrology, looking at the impacts of the solar array on water quality and groundwater recharge. We have researchers from our Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences group that will be measuring the impacts of the array and the microclimate within the array. We have a group that will be looking at the agronomic productivity of the ground cover, so plants that are planted on the ground. How do those plants do within the array? And what we're excited about with this fixed tilt portion of the array is that we have the racking for the array and the rows of the array are purposely spaced at different intervals. And so our researchers will be able to conduct experiments with those different amounts of shading and spacing between the rows of the array. We also have groups that will be monitoring pollinators, looking at migratory birds and wildlife. And we have a group that's looking to implement potential horticulture trials, looking at blackcurrant, red currant, or elderberry. And last but not least, we have folks from our mechanical engineering and solar energy lab who will be monitoring the electricity output of the array and using that as a teaching opportunity for our students. So we're able to do some things with this array, I think quite a bit considering it's a relatively small location, but we're also interested in hearing from the public about questions and opportunities that you'd like to see as well. So I do have some information about our seeding approach and native seed mix. That's just there for reference, and these slides will be available after our talk for anyone who's interested. And I also wanted to just leave you with some agrivoltaics resources from locally, including excellent work from Renew Wisconsin and Nolan while he was an intern at Renew, as well as resources from the U.S. Department of Energy, the National Renewable Energy Lab, and global resources as well. So our goal here is to inform, engage, and inspire our audience. So thank you very much for your time, and you can scan the QR code if you'd like to find out more information about our pilot project. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So once again, I'm Nolan Stumpf. I work in project development.
And I'm Sarah Glover, and I work on land stewardship.
So we're going to talk about One Energy's approach to dual-use solar or agrivoltaics and provide some local examples of projects here in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So One Energy, if you're not familiar, is an independent developer of distributed generation, community solar, and large utility projects. Sarah and I, along with many of our colleagues that are here at the summit today, we work out of our Madison office, where we develop, engineer, and manage construction and operation of solar farms throughout the Midwest. You can see the map on the screen shows our Midwest portfolio, predominantly in Wisconsin, but also Minnesota, Illinois, and Iowa. Recently, we became a public benefit corporation. Part of that ethos and integral to our business is viewing solar projects as conservation projects as well. Sarah will discuss a few examples, and land stewardship is really an integral aspect of our work. These are slightly outdated numbers, I believe, but about 948 acres of pollinator habitat created and 155 acres of projects grazed by sheep and counting. So why does dual-use solar or agrivoltaics really matter to One Energy? As developers, our number one goal is truly to be good neighbors, and we really believe that our solar projects are that. They're quiet, safe, and integrate well with rural communities. Planting diverse, native, and pollinator-friendly species with deep, dense root systems improves soil nutrients over time and increases water infiltration, which is beneficial to stormwater and erosion control during and after construction. Grazing sheep in a pasture beneath solar panels is a low-impact form of agriculture that provides dual land use opportunities for farmers and landowners and supports the local community. Dual use practices not only improve the visual aspects of solar farms, but also create habitat for life that demonstrates the natural safety and benefits to the land and wildlife that they provide. The partnerships created with neighboring or local agricultural businesses enable these projects to be successful and integrate well with rural communities. Talking about dual use approach to project neighbors or during permitting receives the most positive reaction out of any topic that we speak about. Dual use solar or agrivoltaics increases the awareness of the low impact nature of solar development. It also increases opportunities and excitement for site tours, public engagement, education of solar, and at the very least might lead some to speak more openly and engage in discourse about solar in their community. Sarah's going to highlight a few examples of our projects now.
All right, I'm just going to go over a few examples of One Energy's dual-use projects. So this is Ledgeview Solar, also named Woolly Watts by Olivia, who's both the landowner. By Olivia, who's the landowner and also grazes her sheep at this project. So for our solar grazing projects, we pay farmers to graze sheep instead of having the sites mowed. And the sheep really appreciate the shade of the panels in the summer on rainy days. It's been working well. And Ledgeview is our first project that has some permanent woven wire fencing attached to the piles beneath the panels to create 1 acre paddocks. So it's 30-acre site with 30 different 1 acre paddocks that Olivia moves the sheep every couple of days throughout the site to helps prevent overgrazing, and we're also testing the impacts on soil health that's being done by the Sand County Foundation based here in Madison. And then we've also got a site where Bo and Grace, who started Discovery Grazing, live next to. So it's Tito Solar in Fitchburg, also pretty close to here. So they're able to just walk their sheep over from their farm to this site. And they started with only a few sheep, and now, because of this project, they have expanded their flock to over 100, and they're planning to graze some other solar projects nearby. So excited to be working with them. Blue Prairie Solar in Black River Falls is being grazed by a neighbor, Heather, who has a flock of sheep for training Australian shepherds for herding competitions. And last summer, we gave a tour of Blue Prairie to a group with Farmers for Solar, which is organized by Clean Wisconsin, and included a herding demonstration by Heather and one of her dogs, Yeti, that's pictured on the right there. So that was really fun to see. And we think showing these projects to people up close and having them walk through them is really important for shifting perceptions of solar and solar land use. And we also want farmers to know about these opportunities to collaborate. We're hosting some beehives at Webster Creek Solar, and have been enjoying some very delicious honey from Ard's Bees. That's in New Lisbon. But on most of our sites, we plant native prairie for pollinator habitat, which is another great dual-use opportunity. And NRS, or Natural Resource Services, is here, so you should talk to them because they've seeded most of our native prairie, and there's very little native prairie left in the Midwest, so this is a great opportunity to help out pollinators. The Stroba Solar was seeded with a mix of 30 species of native grasses and wildflowers about 3 years ago, and now when I visit in the summer, there are just so many birds and insects on this site, so it's been really fun to see. And pollinator habitat adjacent to farmland can increase the yields of some crops, especially soybeans, so there are some agricultural benefits as well. And native plants also just provide so many different ecosystem services. And Stockton Solar was also seeded by NRS with a mix of 30 native species about 3 years ago. We recently had a huge bloom of black-eyed Susan, which shows up earlier on in prairie establishment. And I think from the aerial view, it looks like a golden beacon to pollinators passing by, and I'm excited to see it become more diverse over time as the other plant species start to fill in. So when we undertake solar projects, we have a responsibility to care for the land. And I think that land stewardship should really be a priority for solar development. And through dual-use solar, we can find common ground by collaborating with farmers in a way that benefits both the land and the surrounding community. So that was just a quick overview, and I think we'll go to questions now.
Alrighty, is this working? Yeah, okay. So I've got a mic. Otherwise, if you guys want to shout out your questions as well, kindly just like raise your hand first. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Would you like the mic?
I can yell.
Okay.
I have two questions. The woolly watts, are the sheep there permanently? And I know they move around the site. And then the other thing is, when you have them in these sites, does that change your liability issues? And how do you address that?
So the sheep are there throughout the whole grazing season, really. They're just moved off in the winter to the adjacent farm to stay in the barn and shelter a bit. As you saw, they did actually stay out a bit longer in the snow with the panels there. And for liability, farmers usually have really good insurance policies already. So most of the time, the farmers have already been able to meet our insurance requirements for the site.
Yep, go ahead, Brady.
Any opportunities for major crops like corn or soybean? And in particular, I just saw in a science magazine vertical solar panels, bifacial, spaced maybe 30 feet, so that you could actually run major agricultural equipment between the rows.
So it wouldn't work with the typical solar array designs that we have, but the vertical panels have been really popular, I think especially more in Europe or places with limited land access. So we're mostly looking at herbs and leafy vegetables and things that kind of coexist better with our more typical solar project.
I can add that electricity is a commodity, so we're trying to basically produce that commodity at lowest cost possible. So that's part of the reason why I think like traditional row crops and specialty crops are a little bit more at the frontier of agrivoltaics at this time.
We've got in the back here.
Just a question on the UW pilot project location with the three styles of racking. Is essentially all the same size modules and all the same brand of type inverters for the three types of racking?
Yes, we have the modules are Heliene, 540 watt bifacial modules. So we use the same modules throughout all the types of racking, and likewise with the inverters as well.
And the large 2 megawatts of larger fixed tilt racking is the leading edge the same as like the adjustable section.
Right. The leading edge is we're at about 2.5 feet on the drip edge or the leading edge, and then they go up to about 7 or 8 feet or so.
And the farthest first racking, the 8 foot 14, do you know what that racking was?
I would have to look into that for you, but happy to do that. Yep.
Good morning. In India, agrivoltaics is pretty far advanced, and I know that it's not the same terrain, but as climate change comes on and things get hotter, they're identifying a lot of plants that actually benefit from the midday shade. And beyond the berries that you mentioned, what work is being done to identify a broader range of crops that would be happy growing under solar panels and can be managed with smaller equipment?
That's a great question. Thank you. And one area where I've learned a lot, and I'm by no means an expert as far as what's happening globally, but one area where I did learn a lot of information, and I would refer people to if they're interested, would be there's a conference called the World Agrivoltaics Conference, and that is an event where people from around the world who are working on projects like the projects that Sarah and Nolan were talking about and the projects like I was talking about, that's where people get together and share information about what's working where and what they're learning and what might be able to be replicated in other areas. So it is a vast growing area of interest, and the research is rapidly increasing. So that's one area where I would refer you to in terms of learning more about what types of plants and what types of opportunities there might be. But I think you're absolutely right when it comes to plants that are happiest in the shade at the noontime sun. The other living organism that's pretty happy in the shade at noontime sun is human beings. And that's another area where there's some really terrific research happening. I know at the University of Arizona, they're looking at farm workers, especially in the arid Southwest. You think about some of the temperatures that are in that area, and what can be done to help protect farm workers from heat stroke and other debilitating impacts. So those are some initial thoughts.
Yeah, and also just to add to Josh's submission, a lot of research is now coming up with with more universities partnering with local farmers and people like Wine Energy, because this technology has not been around until very recently for the US. And so we're seeing more and more research organizations or institutions coming on board to look at the different species. And like you saw the example in Kenya and Tanzania, where University of Arizona, Kenya is mostly semi-arid. And so they tested different plots with vegetable crops and also crops that really don't tolerate the shade well. And overall, they saw that there was more productivity for the crops that needed the shade. But also in China, at least, where that technology has been also being piloted for the longest time than the US, we see that for those farmers who are even doing fishing or shrimp, they say that with having solar panels over the area where they are growing shrimp, they see increase in the number of shrimp that they are harvesting there. So we're going to see more of this as the US takes off. But the landscape, I'm saying, what I see with the landscape, and I mean, you can also confirm, is that people are very excited about this technology, and they're all in, all hands on deck to see that they also catch up with countries like Germany and China.
Jack Solar Garden was also mentioned in the beginning. They have great vegetable crop research, and Big River Farms is in Minnesota, is another great one.
There's two things I'm curious if we might see more of in these agrivoltaic scenarios, and it's new and emerging farmers and cows. Can anyone speak to that?
That's a great question. So I think part of what is really interesting about this creative use, dual use land opportunity is that it does provide incredible opportunities to bring in people who may not have considered themselves traditional farmers or traditional agricultural stewards. So I think that's one area where there is a lot of opportunity, and there's also there's micro farms and opportunities for urban locations and things like that. There was a really interesting RFP that the city of Detroit issued just last year, looking for developers who could look at locations within the city that were blighted locations and potentially turn those into micro locations for farming that could help sustain local communities and help avoid the occurrence of food deserts and things like that. So some interesting things there. In terms of your question about cows, the place where I look to for that type of work is happening at University of Minnesota Morris. There's a wonderful researcher there by the name of Brad Hines, and Brad is one of the leaders in. He built an array at the University of Minnesota Morris, and is and has cows and other large animals at that location.
Is the pilot project location just going to be agriculture, or are they going to test like for grazing animals, just basic, how well they, or the damage that larger grazing cattle would do?
Yeah. At this time, it's sort of to be determined. One of the interesting things with that elevated section of the array is that potentially it could be something where we bring in animals from time to time. We don't have facilities right there that could house animals permanently, and so we'd have to, be thinking about how can we do this in a way that meets all the safety requirements for animals, and of course any concerns about the array itself and things like that. But in theory, it could be possible, and it's something that has been discussed, although no specific plans are in place right now.
Comment on the crops that are more shade tolerant, that a crop we grow a lot of is potatoes, and how well they do the moisture against a lot of that partially shaded. You can't get equipment necessarily in that, but with the multi-state sections, it would be curious how the test production might. If it's farmers that we just work with smaller harvesting equipment to get higher production, so it's there's a lot open to it.
Thank you. Yes, potatoes would be great. Thank you.
And they are growing potatoes at Jack's Solar Garden, and they had a little taste test while I was out there. They have a ton of vegetables. They have a whole CSA program out of there, so it's a good place to look.
This seems like such a lovely approach and such a no-brainer. And I just, all that life underneath the solar panels is just really heartwarming. What I'm wondering is if I were to take this idea to state or federal legislators, are there common misconceptions or points of resistance that are out there? Or is this too new for that to have happened? Or like what might a person run into if taking this to policymakers?
Well, it's because it's still very new, relatively new, so it's not, there's not a ton of research that is out there, and that's part of the work that I'm doing with Renew Wisconsin to dig into what the policies are and what are the kinds of things that people would run into. I don't know if anyone on the panel can weigh in on this, but because it's really new, it's a landscape that we're all figuring out. But yeah, more to come.
And there's a lot of discussion about taking farmland out of production. So I think talking about this is important for seeing that, like you said, the land's very much alive and producing plants and supporting sheep or other crops. I think that's important to emphasize.
Kind of a two-part question. Establishing either prairie or the most beneficial, least expensive treatment underneath panels seems to me really important. And is there a price per acre? What do you tell people if you're talking to them about a new project and you say it's X dollars per watt with your solar project, but if you do this, if you deal with, I'm sure there's a continuum, but I mean, you talked about the prairie grasses reestablishing, and I think in terms of resting the land, that's really been hammered with corn and beans over the years. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Thank you for that question. I think when I hear your question, what I think of is a term that we sometimes refer to as soft costs. What are the soft costs associated with planning an agrivoltaics array as opposed to a regular array? And whether that's a cost per watt or a cost per acre of seed. There's also, it requires maybe a different type of planning than we're typically used to. I mean, there are groups like One Energy that are innovators in the area, but it's not necessarily standard practice for renewable energy developers to be talking to farmers or conservationists as they're planning their array. And so one thing that we learned during our pilot project was implementing the concept of integrated design early on in our project. So we walked our site with the group that does commercial farming in that area. We walked the site with the development team as well as with folks from the facility where the location is going to be, where the location is. And that integrated design process, not only walking the site together, but then also involving all these groups during the planning period, that was a critical aspect of the success of our project. And that's an area that there's more research that needs to be done and more data needs to be collected in terms of what are some of those trade-offs in thinking about planning through an integrated design process and being able to ascertain some of those specific costs.
I guess I'll just add to, like, for One Energy's perspective, like the agrivoltaics or dual use versus like regular installation, that's hard for us to tell because it is kind of like our bread and butter and just what we do. But in terms of like soft costs, I would say, to summarize, we kind of spend things, choose to not spend on others. So it's kind of maybe breaks even in the long term, but it's really in order to get as many projects built and build them and construct them well, like I said, to be good neighbors.
I know the Wisconsin Farmers Union has a position that they wouldn't support a solar project on farmland unless it included an ag component of grazing or pollinators. But the much larger lobby group in Wisconsin is the Farm Bureau. Do they have a position on solar installations on farmland?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can't speak for that organization specifically. But I think, once again, I think that the more kind of ways that we can implement projects that work well with the communities, the better. So I'm not sure. I can't speak exactly for certain organizations.
Okay, we'll do one final question here, and thanks everybody for attending.
All right, just in under the wire. Senator Tammy Baldwin and another senator from Iowa, I think it's Grassley, have a proposed bill on agrivoltaics. I think it's basically asking Department of Agriculture to develop criteria for farmland, et cetera, for agrivoltaics. Can you speak to that or give us more details on that?
I don't have all the details, but I can say that there have been informal discussions with Senator Baldwin's office, and they seem very interested in learning more about what's happening on the ground in Wisconsin and how they can implement good ideas in a farm bill and that type of thing. So but that's about as much as I can share. I don't know, Dorothy.